Good morning. Globally respected American political scientist John Mearsheimer was recently in Delhi for a television summit. I'm assuming that this was his first visit to India. He was asked many questions, but three of them were specific to India. So, what I wish to do is pick up his responses to these three questions and expand on them. So the first question specific to India, the professor was asked is India a great power? He said no, India is not a great power. There are only three great powers in the world. They are America, China and Russia. He added that India could be classified as an aspiring great power. I will argue that India is not even an aspiring great power. Realistically speaking, India can best be classified as an aspiring major power which is rungs below a great power. For example, a major power is nations like Germany, France, Japan, South Korea. And why I say that is that a great power, in my assessment, it has four fundamental attributes. Now, the professor spoke of two attributes, and the two attributes he gave are a population, a sizable population, and second he said wealth. These two things should be there for a nation to become a great power. And then he compared India with China and said that China also at one time had the population size like India, it did not have wealth. Once China became wealthy, it became a great power. India still is not wealthy, so it is not a great power. These are his response. Now, I say that let's start with the four attributes, and the first is population, as the professor spoke about. Population per se is actually a liability unless it is an asset. And to be an asset, the population should contribute, it should have a value, and it should enhance national power, building of the nation. So, the first thing that a population should have is a system of a good formal education. We know that the system of education in India is learning by rote. What is required is a system where creative thinking, creative arts, they are encouraged. And alongside, there is a focus on STEM subjects. STEM, we know, is science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Many would know that as far as China is concerned, as early as 1979, when their leader Deng Xiaoping was there and he gave four modernizations for building China, one of the modernizations was a focus, a budget and a push to science and technology. Similarly, many would be aware that in Russia, mathematics is given importance right from the primary school. Now, all this is not there in India. In India, formal education does not get the budget, does not get the attention that it deserves, especially to meet the present times. Now, there is a lot of focus on skill. For example, Prime Minister Skill India, but skill by itself will not be enough to make a nation strong. So much for population. Now, the second attribute that the professor spoke of is wealth. Today, when we talk of generating wealth, we are basically talking about the new age technologies, because we know that the third industrial revolution, it started in America, it's already there, and the world now is shifting to the fourth industrial revolution, which is about artificial intelligence and new disruptive technologies. Now, as far as China is concerned, China is already the manufacturing hub of the world. It is the global factory of manufacturing. What it is doing is, it has to now transit to the fourth industrial revolution, and in so many areas, it is not only competing, it is ahead in the competition of America. For example, recently, China has just concluded their two sessions of 2024 of this year, two sessions, which was presided by Chinese President Xi Jinping. And once again, he put the emphasis on new productive forces. Now, Chinese new productive forces, or this term which is specific to Xi Jinping, has three attributes. One is, it is about new energy. We know this is about electric vehicles, solar and wind panels, batteries, in all these areas. China is ahead of America and the world. The second thing, which is equally important, is about moving to industrial internet. That means bringing artificial intelligence and disruptive technologies into manufacturing. And the backbone of that, the industrial internet, is 5G. We know that China has already rolled out 5G ahead of the Americans. And the other things, when we talk of the industrial internet, they are blockchain, they are artificial intelligence, cloud computing and data. So the two key things here for industrial internet are computing and data. Now, since China is a big country, its eastern China is developed, whereas the western China, which is the China facing India, is still developing and underdeveloped. They are looking for a uniformity across China to bring in the industrial internet throughout the country. And for that, in June of 2022, they came up with the need for a national computing network, which has to be finished by 2025. And this is based on the concept of what the Chinese called Eastern data and Western computing. Now, East, as I said, is developed. So East has a lot of computing. It needs data. So more data centers have to come up in East China. And West China, which is underdeveloped, it has a lot of data, it lacks computing power. So more and more computing clusters are coming up there. So this is what is happening as far as industrial internet is concerned. So when people say that Chinese economy is nosediving, it is actually transiting. It is transiting to the industrial internet. It has a lot of other issues, but this is the key issue where the focus is being put. And the third thing about this new productive forces that Xi Jinping spoke about are the new technologies. A lot of money and focus the Chinese have put in these technologies, which pertain to quantum technologies, new materials, biopharmaceuticals, gene technology, then exploration of deep sea, space and air. These are the areas. So this is the second thing. This is how you generate wealth. And India is not in this game yet, because India is at a very preliminary stage of artificial intelligence and disruptive technologies. The third attribute, according to me, is having military power. This is something that a great power should have. Now, when we talk of military power, and since India is focused on the Indian Ocean region, let me just say a few words on maritime power, because that is the key. You see, if a nation wants to have naval power, it has to also have maritime power. When we talk of maritime power, China today has the largest shipbuilding in the world by tonnage. Then there are, out of 10 big ports in the world, seaports, 7 are in China. Then Chinese vessels with the Chinese flag, 26% of commercial trade is done by those vessels. India is not in this game, or it is very little in this game. Next, let's see. As far as commercial shipping is concerned, many people may not know that India's commercial ship, when they have to do repairs, there is no repair for them available in India itself. And they actually go to countries like Germany, to Dubai and to Singapore for the repair of commercial ships. So this is really the state of the maritime power, the commercial power. Now, when we look at the naval power, then again, the Chinese today have something like 375 ships, which is the largest naval ships in the world. So they have the largest navy, they have the largest coast guard, they have the largest maritime militia. Now India is not in this game, so it cannot classify even as a major power. And the last and the most important thing perhaps is about having a vibrant defense industry, something that India does not have. Despite all the talk of the last 10 years, during the Modi government of Atmanirbharta, Make in India in defense, the fact of the matter is, you see the result. The latest report of SIPRI. Now, SIPRI is a very prestigious global think tank based in Sweden. It comes out with a yearly report on defense services across the world. Once again this year, in their report, they have said that India is the largest arms importer in the world. I don't have to say anything more than that. So when we look at all the four attributes that make a great power, realistically speaking, that is population, that is wealth or technology rather, which will generate wealth, military power or maritime power, and we look at the defense industrial complex, India is not in the game. The second question that the professor was asked is that in his assessment, will China attack Taiwan? And if it happens, what will be India's role in that war in support of America? And the professor said that China will not attack Taiwan, and this is a very correct and a logical thing, notwithstanding the fact what the American analysts keep talking or their military officers serving or retired talk. They've even given a deadline of 2027. This will not happen. Now the professor gives two reasons why it will not happen. Let us discuss his reasons. He says the first is that amphibious operations, doing operations across a water body, they are very difficult. That's a very valid reason. So for PLA Navy, it will be a very difficult operation, an amphibious operation. So unless they are compelled, they are unlikely to do that. And the second reason that the professor gives it, that the PLA has not fought a war since last it fought was in 1979. Whereas the US military during the unipolar moment, it has been fighting wars all over the world. And therefore, the American military war machine is well oiled. Now, here I have a difference of opinion with the professor. I think the key reason why two great powers will not go to war, a direct war, which is US military and China, the reason is that neither side will be assured of any degree of war control to accomplish their war objectives. Now, if you are not assured of a certain desired war control, why would you go to war? It becomes meaningless. And the reason why they will not be confident, both sides, of a war control is because what we'll be looking at is an entirely different war the world has not seen between two great powers. And in this war, what will be different is, at all the three levels of war, which is the strategic level, the highest level, the operational level of war, and the tactical level of war, the PLA has an asymmetrical warfare, an asymmetrical thinking. Now, the PLA thinking at the strategic level is, they have a thinking of cognitive confrontation. That means you attack directly the political leadership, and that will be done through their cyber capability. If they do lots of cyber attacks, that is loosely called then the cyber war, which brings the entire civilian life to a standstill. And the second element is their counterspace capabilities, which are huge. In fact, both these things, the cyber and the counterspace, Xi Jinping, he has elevated and told the PLA as the commander-in-chief of his military that they should be elevated to the strategic level. And the Americans are aware of that, because the Americans also have good cyber capabilities, comparable cyber capabilities. And Given the huge counterspace capabilities of the PLA, they have recently raised a space force. So this is what will happen at the strategic level. Now at the operational level of war, once again the PLA has a doctrine which they call a systems destruction warfare. That means you are not really looking at attrition. You're not looking at destroying a tank to a tank, a gun to a gun, or you're not doing all this. What you're looking at is how to deny, disrupt and destroy the communication of the other side. And both have the capability, both great powers. As far as PLA is concerned, they have two organizations which will do this. One is what they call the Strategic Support Force. It has under it cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, which is where electronic warfare is done, and it has space. So these three domains come under the Strategic Support Force, which is the non-kinetic element for disruption of communication. As far as the kinetic element of disruption is concerned, it is that organization called Rocket Force, where the Chinese have perhaps the largest inventory of land-based missile with any great power, and specific to the US military, something that US military does not have in their inventory yet, the PLA has hypersonic glide vehicles and hypersonic cruise missiles. Now, even at the tactical level, again it is asymmetrical, because the US military, their thinking is, or their doctrine is, to have a joint force. And what they have is a mission command. That means a directive style of command. The lowest commander, to accomplish a tactical objective, he is given freedom to do things as he wants, so long as the task is done. That is a directive style of command, which is not the case with the PLA. Perhaps when the professor said that they have not fought, the PLA has not fought a war since 1979, he was referring to this aspect. Because what the PLA has done is, unlike having a joint force, what the adversary has, they have what is called a joint integrated operations, and they look at mission sets. Mission set is a strike force which is temporarily created, and it is mission specific. This is what the PLA does. So the point here is that if at the conventional level, two great powers are not very assured of a desirable war control, then things can only escalate to the next level, and the next level is the nuclear level. That is where both sides today have a nuclear deterrence, and both sides know that things will escalate to an extent where it will be devastating. We'll see devastation in the world. So this is the reason they will not fight. And the third reason why the Chinese will not fight with Taiwanese unless provoked is that it starts to logic, why will a Chinese fight with a Chinese? They both are Chinese. So there is no reason really, unless there is a compellence to do so. So this are the three basic reasons why China will not attack Taiwan. Now the second part of the question is, is what will be India's role in case of a war over Taiwan? The professor said that India will have an indirect support role. Let me amplify the indirect support role. There are three things that India is likely to do. As rightly pointed out by the professor, India will certainly not get into a direct war with the Chinese over Taiwan. But there are three things it can do. One is, it already has a shipyard agreement with the Americans, and perhaps even now extended to the Quad navies, because of which the Indian shipyards and the Indian bases will be available to the US naval vessels. So that is one advantage that the Americans can have. The second advantage is that, as we are aware, India's focus is on the Indian Ocean region, where it wants to be a net security provider. And today, after having signed the 4 foundation agreements, military agreements of the US military, it also has now a combat role to play here. So it can play a combat role supported fully by the US military, and that role would be a maritime blockade of Chinese commercial trade, a huge trade that passes through the Indian Ocean region, something to the tune of $4 trillion annually. And the third role is what we have seen recently in the Gaza war, that the Fifth Fleet of the Americans, which is based in Bahrain, if it wants to join the war in Taiwan, then the Indian naval ships, they can help escort them in their area of responsibility as being the net security provider. So these are the big three things. The point is, but can India do this is the question. Now, it will be argued by a lot of naval officers that look, today we have a lot of bases on the way. We have a better operational turnaround for the fuel, so we have longer legs. But what nobody will talk about is that we have very limited ocean going ships, and the few ships that India has, the problem there is that all ships have a limited engine hour, and they have been used extensively in perception management. And what that means is they have been used on what the Navy calls mission deployment. They have been used now on escorting the ships. They've been used in the Arabian Sea towards the Gulf of Aden against piracy in an anti-piracy role, and they are being used in naval diplomacy and naval exercises. So the engine hours are limited. Our capabilities are limited. So the point I am making is, honestly, India will have no role at all. Whatever the professor may say or what the Americans may be thinking, except for providing them bases through the shipyard agreement, it will stay away from unnecessarily provoking China. The third question that the professor was asked is that in case of an India-China war, will Russia support India? And he said that Russia will stay neutral in a war between India and China. But if push comes to shove, then Russia will support China rather than India because Russia has closer ties with China. Now, my take is a bit different on this. I believe that there is such a huge mismatch between the PLA capabilities and the capability of the Indian military that a decisive war on Chinese terms will start and finish at the strategic and the operational level itself. It will not come down to the tactical level, which is the strength of the Indian military, which is where the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army fights. Because if you see the capabilities, as I said, the asymmetrical capabilities of the PLA, Indian military has no answer to the PLA strategic support force, to the PLA rocket force, to their bombers, to the huge inventory of varied drones, to the directed energy weapons. India simply has no answer. And when we look at the airborne forces, today the PLA has in excess of 100,000 airborne troops, and India actually has a very measly amount of airborne forces, which is less than a brigade. I would put it at about 2,000 or 2,500 airborne troops. So what is the comparison between 2,500 and over 100,000 troops? So as far as Russia is concerned, while Russia will not deny an operational support role to India, it will be happy to give India the spare parts, it will be happy to give what India wants in a war with China, knowing fully well that it will not affect PLA's campaign at all. Thank you.